Welcome back to the Purpose and Profit Club podcast. Today, we're going to talk about some major trends that I'm seeing that are going to shape 2025 and beyond. So, fresh off of attending and speaking over in Orlando at GiveCon, that was a conference presented by Bloomerang and QGive. They had so many amazing speakers, and I was attending sessions. I got to see many of my clients in real life and so many of my favorite consultants and colleagues. And here's a really important thing. I also did a lot of just networking, introducing myself, meeting new friends. And a lot of the trends that I'm going to actually share with you today are from sessions I attended, from conversations I had. And I really, really made it a point not to just hang out in my little group of people that I knew and to really get out there and have conversations. And that's what you're going to hear today. So I took some time after GiveCon and I was like, okay, I was writing down notes from different sessions. And then the other thing I like to do is just let it kind of sink in, right? Let it see what's resonant, see kind of over the few weeks, what's still jumping out at me. And that is the list that I'm sharing with you today. Okay. So 10 trends. We're going to dig into trend number 1. Bravery wins every time. The fundraisers who ask early, ask often, and don't overthink whether it's the right time are the ones who win. The right time is now, always. And a lot of my session was on this core theme of brave fundraising, brave storytelling, brave asks. So one of the things that keeps people stuck is this idea of I don't want to turn anyone off. I don't want to, make them feel ... I don't want to annoy them, right? It's a lot of I don't want them to feel negatively. So I'm just going to keep the story as we keep it. I'm going to keep the event as we've done it, and everything becomes rinse and repeat. And nothing's really brave. It's very sterile. It's very watered down. Versus identifying, I'm going to try this different. I'm going to step into bravery, and it's going to feel a little uncomfortable. Not everyone may think this campaign, this story, this thing, this appeal is a great idea, but that's okay. I don't need buy-in from 100% of the people, because part of being brave is that you feel that fear and you go. So even if you're thinking, what if donors say no? What if we ask too much? The reality is that the hesitation, and I'm going to offer that inner chatter, that inner right, costs you funding. It costs you funding. It's not actually the ask itself that's the problem. It is the dialing down, the dimming, the decaf energy that's showing up instead of bravery. When you think about the powerhouse fundraisers, executive directors, thought leaders in our sector, even brands you like, even for-profits, maybe founders you think are really cool. Whitney Wolfe Herd, I watched her masterclass on Plane Flight a while back, and she's the founder of Bumble. And she's so brave. She's so audacious. She's so uniquely her. And she had lots of people being like, I don't know about this. I don't know about that, right? She founded a dating app that totally reversed the way that most dating apps did it, right? And had she said, you know what, you're right, we got to stay in the lines of what dating apps look like. We got to stay in the lines of what fundraising looks like. We wouldn't even know her name. I wouldn't have even watched the masterclass. The app probably wouldn't exist, right? So bravery wins every time. All right, trend number 2. This is a big one. And it's going to go, ask as much as you want. Just don't forget to think. Ask as much as you want. Just don't forget to think. Now, here's the thing. I was writing notes partly on a paper and pad and partly in my notes app, and I can't remember which session to attribute this to. So if you were attending this session, then please message me so we can attribute it to the right person. But what this speaker said was basically the problem isn't the frequency and ask, right? It's the follow through. So many people are scared of asking a donor again because they gave to a different campaign. That's not actually a problem. She said, as long as you're keeping donors in the loop, making them feel like they matter, thanking them, reporting back on the gift, you're building loyalty. And you can ask them again. And if I put myself in the center of that, like donor as the donor experience, I'm like, that's totally true. So if I give to your spring campaign, I give a gift, and your thought is, well, I can't ask Christina anytime soon because she gave to the spring campaign. Now I got this other thing happening. It hasn't been long enough. It's like, what are you even doing? Right? The question is, have I followed through? Did I think, Christina? Did I report back? Hey, here's what we were able to do with your gift. Here's what we've got cooking coming down the pipeline. It always really irritates me, choosing my words. It irritates me when you segment me out because you think I'm going to get annoyed so you don't ask me again. When in fact, you just did me a disservice because you excluded me from a campaign because you're like, I shouldn't ask again. When in fact, I actually might want to help make that thing happen. Let's say you're fundraising for um, a new shipment of supplies to your arts program. Okay. And you're like, yeah, but she already gave to like the spring event, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, your girl loves watercolor. Give me a chance to donate to your campaign so you can get new watercolors in your after school program. So as long as you don't forget to think. Okay. Trend number 3. This was such a good one. So this came from a question. I gave my talk, and then we had time for a Q&A. It was such a good Q&A, and this came from a question which basically said some flavor of, I love your social street team concept. Yes, 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 but here's why I don't think it will work for my cause area. And so trend number 3 is, yes, actually, even the toughest causes can build a movement and meaning online. So this person at GiveCon asked basically if her organization, which treats and supports people and has awareness campaigns for colorectal cancer. She was like, no one wants to talk about that online, right? It has a taboo, right? And she's like, we're not going to be able to partner with the creator economy, right? And I was like, wrong. But I loved the question. I love the question because the key here is niching in and finding the right voices. Now, will my neighbor across the street be the perfect social street teamer to talk about colorectal cancer? Maybe not. Maybe she would be the perfect street teamer to talk about a dog rescue because I always see her walking the dog, right? You want to find the audience alignment. You're going to have to find somebody who's already talking about things that people who experience that are already experiencing. And can I tell you the amount of people who are talking about digestion, who are talking about health and wellness, who are talking about early detection? They're out there. They're absolutely talking even about go and poo. They're absolutely talking about colorectal cancer. You've got to, number 1, believe, yes, they're out there. Then 2, you want to see evidence of it. So the first place I'd go is just like search the hashtag or search a relevant hashtag so you can start seeing that there's some creators out there, in fact, talking about it. I mean, when we think about gut health, I'm like, people are totally talking about, even if we can find some adjacent alignment, which you can, yes, yes, yes. So the key is finding the right voices, the right stories, and the right community to amplify your message. Yes, even your mission, even a tough cause. This even applies to causes that feel heavy. So we also had somebody who raised their hand that their space was suicide prevention. Another space was hospice care, right? Where you're like, oh, heavy, hard, not talked about, potentially taboo. And 2 things can be true. Totally talked about. If you think about even some of the best creators and influencers, it's because they've gone deep and talked about something that is taboo that took them into stardom, right? And so there are absolutely people who maybe have had a loved one who has gone through this, who are talking about this, people who are in adjacent areas. Yes, yes, yes. While the topics maybe aren't quote unquote traditionally fun, like I just said, my neighbor who would probably be a great advocate for a particular dog breed and a rescue program, they can be soul filling. She's not the right person for you, but there is your perfect person and multiple people out there. Okay. So the key here is finding the joy, finding the grace, finding the purpose in the campaigns, and asking yourself, what would a street teamer want out of it? Where are they already hanging out? So you want to make sure that you're framing your mission and even just the possibility of this. Are you framing it around fear? Or are you thinking about giving people a way to start being part of something powerful? Again, a movement. We think about breast cancer. There was a time where breast cancer was a taboo topic because we weren't talking about breasts, we weren't talking about boobs, we were talking any of that, right? And then at some point it became so common, so in our vernacular. It's talked about all the time. So much so that people walk for it. They have their ribbons for it. It's very, very normalized, even though, technically it's, something we wouldn't have maybe talked about 20 years ago. I don't know, 30 years ago, maybe longer. Trend number 4, belonging raises more than any generic campaign ever will. So the best fundraisers don't just ask for money, they create spaces where people want to show up, they want to give, they want to bring others with me. That's what turns donors into long-time supporters. Part of that belonging is making giving more inclusive. Shout out to Lynn Wester. I attended her DEI session and it was really amazing because she was like, this is taught by a white person. This is really for white people. And it was such a good conversation. And a couple of the exercises she did with us, it was really fun and interactive, was she had us picture a philanthropist, like in our mind's eye, picture a philanthropist. Then she had us picture someone generous. And for, I think, the whole room, myself included, the philanthropist was like white, older, fancy, in a suit. And then I picture somebody generous and they were like a friend, a community member, a teacher, a colleague, right? They were I felt comfortable around them. And she made such a distinction that we need to start shifting the way that we even view donors and donor prospects and view generosity. She went on to talk about giving societies and donor levels, right? So you can only join this giving society if you give at X, and how that basically excludes people and creates unnecessary barriers or othering, and the importance of creating giving societies that are inclusive at any level, right? That you can be part of it for literally any level and up. And I really liked that because it really centers on that belonging. And we look at the younger generations, and belonging is very, very important. Belonging is like a core need for all of us. So it's really important to think about your donors and how to create that belonging, because when donors feel like they belong, they don't just give once, they keep giving and they bring others with them. Okay, this is another fun one. And again, I'm like, oh my gosh, who do I attribute this to? This is, maybe you've heard this before, but in this context, I was like, so good. I call this the saw this, thought of you, a secret fundraising superpower. So the best fundraisers know that relationships drive revenue, but the simple act of sending a donor or a sponsor or a donor prospect or a volunteer something, a message that says, saw this, thought of you, builds connection and deepens loyalty. And when I heard that, I was like, oh yeah, I've like naturally done that. I remember years ago, I was listening to this podcast and I was like, oh my gosh, this person I know needs to hear this podcast. This is so relevant for her mission. I hadn't seen her in many, many months. I sent her an email and said, saw this, thought of you, right? And what that fueled, what that created was then a meeting and a long-term client for me, which was so wild because my intention was like, she's just got to hear this. Oh my gosh, she needs to listen to this podcast. It's so relevant. And then what happened was connection, right? And the same thing is true for you. It's like you're tossing the ball. You're like a tennis ball. You're volleying it back to them. And I think, to speak to the earlier one about thinking, sometimes we're thinking in such a formal way. We're thinking in such a sterile way. We're thinking in such a generic way. And then so is your nurturing. It's all very sterile. It's like, can we do a pattern interrupt? Can we do a saw this and thought of you? And this could be a text message, a phone call, what I did, an email. It can be anything. So have those moments, see where you can have, and also don't worry that you're not doing this at scale. Like, that's where we get in the weeds, where you're like, oh my gosh, Christina, how am I supposed to saw this and thought of you for 500 people or 100 people? Do it for one. Just do one today. The next time you're out for a walk, the next time you find an article is great. So if there is an article, a podcast, a moment, a thing, a meme, I don't care, and it drops and it's relevant to your cause area, it's relevant to a conversation you have with a donor, don't overthink it. Saw this, thought of you. Make it short. Doesn't even have to have a call to action. No call to action other than sharing the article. Okay, trend number 6. Hitting funding goals is getting tougher, but that's an opportunity. Okay, so what do I mean? We don't do any Debbie Downer on this podcast. So I'm gonna guide you and support you through this one. So yes, there's a lot of uncertainty. And that was kind of like that was a little bit of like the foundational mood of like with federal grant funding shifts, with a lot of shifts happening in the political climate we're in the States. There's just a lot of uncertainty. One executive director said to me, and it keeps me up at night. This specific thing keeps me up at night. And I think a lot of EDs are having those moments, like these keeping me up at night moments. Okay. So here's the thing. That is happening. Competition for attention, that's happening too. It is real. But the nonprofits that are bold, strategic, brave, and willing to adapt are the ones who will thrive. So please don't retreat. Please don't go quiet. Please don't avoid. Please lean in. This is a time to have conversations with your donors, your subscribers, your followers. You don't have to act like everything's good. You know how sometimes when you're like having a day, this is true. I'm having it like if I'm having a day and I go to pick up my kids at school and I'm like see a bunch of people and everybody's like, how's it going? You're like, good, it's going good. Because you're just like, I'm not gonna go there, right? Don't do that with your people. Don't like you're allowed to do that in certain circumstances in your life. Don't do that with your donors. You're allowed, not in a way that is like super negative, not in a way that is necessarily not true or, over whatever, but you're allowed to say, here's what's going on with us. We were counting on this grant funding and it is gone. Or we thought this and that is not the case anymore. Or we're really worried that medical research has been cut in our cause area. And then you can describe the solution. And that's really why the power of individual donations is so important now more than ever. So don't just pretend and be overly formal when you don't need to be and shouldn't be. Okay. All right. Trend number 7. This is one that I've been like, it's kind of funny because I'm like, I know that it's a trend that we were talking about in this conference, but I'm like, you guys, we got to be doing this like yesterday, like many, many years ago. So trend number 7, monthly giving and email fundraising. Okay. Now is the time. Like it's time to stop being curious and it's time to start prioritizing it. So many nonprofit leaders are like finally interested in recurring giving and monthly giving and really making that a core part of their funding strategy because it has been around. People have had sort of passive monthly donors because it's a form, it's a checkbox, whatever. But I'm talking about branding it, really going all in with monthly giving and email fundraising. So leaders have been curious about it, dipping their toe in it, but hesitant to go all in. So the answer is to start testing. Monthly giving is totally worth it with the right strategy. Same thing. Email. Y'all, I built an email course, Easy Emails for Impact. You can get it anytime. Send me a message or go to splendidcourses.com/email. You will get access to a free webinar and a special offer to access that course, to grab that course. I've been talking about email for many, many years because email has the highest return of investment of any fundraising channel. So it is such a stronger ROI than social media in the traditional social media way, the way that other people teach it, not the way I teach it. So email and monthly giving are two things that go hand in hand and don't sleep on. One of our clients actually used an email only campaign and did an email only campaign to launch her monthly giving program and got over 50 recurring donors in less than a week. Without posting on social media, without picking up the phone and making calls, without sending out text messages, without sending written postcards or appeals, just email. 50 new donors. Okay. Trend number 8. So you're probably been like, when's she going to talk about AI? Yes. Okay. AI. AI and automation are here, but they won't replace relationships. Now, I love that nonprofits are actually like, y'all are experimenting with AI. Many of our clients in the club are using AI. We're using ChatGPT. We're using Gemini. What's the other one? I can't remember, right? We're using it. And you should. You should. So there are some caveats and some great ways to use it. I like to think of AI as like my brainstorming assistant. I can override her. I don't necessarily just take her first draft, but it's a great place to brainstorm ideas. It's a great place to clean up some of your appeals. It's a great place to come up with, if you're trying to brand a new program or a monthly giving program or something like that, it's great for that. Okay. But AI won't replace relationships. So if you want to think about, AI generating content and AI just in general and automation for donor communications, amazing. But the key takeaway here is it's a tool, not a replacement. Authentic human connection will always be the driver of generosity. So you want to actually start using AI, and you can use it in your donation forms. There's a lot of fundraising tools that are using it now. We love it, right? Very, very useful. And just know it's not the thing. Here's what I want to say. It's not going to take over it. And much like a lot of tools out there, it's not going to be your savior. It's not like, oh, well, I'm waiting for this new AI thing that will suddenly fix all of my fundraising problems. No, relationship first, connection first, belonging first, bravery first. AI is a tool. It will collapse timelines for you. It will make it so much faster. It will improve it. It will optimize it, but it doesn't replace relationships. It doesn't replace you. You with me? Okay. This is a fun one. And I want to shout out Rachel Muir. Rachel is somebody that I've followed online seen her on LinkedIn, seen her around the internets for years. And it was really fun to meet her in person. And I just want to shout her out that she was so cool and so fun to hang out with. And I attended her session. And one of the biggest takeaways that I had from her session was this is trend number 9, don't wait for perfection, find the fun and go live. So too many nonprofit leaders hesitate to really launch the campaigns or really go all in on the campaign for fear that they're not perfect yet. But the reality is fundraising moves fast. At least we're ready for it on your side. Like as a donor, we're ready for it. And momentum beats hesitation. So your campaign doesn't need to be flawless. I'm going to say that again. Your campaign doesn't need to be flawless. It needs to be live. It needs to be brave. In fact, that imperfection is like, I think it was Jen Graham that said it, is like catnip. Vulnerability is like catnip. That was her quote. That creates connection. So don't be afraid to use humor. So she had some really fun fundraising in the wild case studies, and she had us laughing so hard about, speaking of the subscription economy, she had a really great case study of a toilet paper brand that is a subscription brand. And they had the founder of the toilet paper brand talking about their give back model and why they have this recycled toilet paper and the problem. So it had this great kind of social good component. Meanwhile, he's talking about this toilet paper. He's selling it while also sitting on a toilet with his pants down, like perfectly placed. You can't see anything, but you can see, his bare legs, and the whole thing is just hilarious, right? And he's like, I'm not getting off this toilet until we sell X. I think that this was for a Kickstarter or something, until we raise, X dollars. And it was so funny. And you think about, and she said that they went on to, because she is a customer of theirs, the way that they connect and find the humor in what is, again, something that maybe is sometimes taboo, something that's a little like, oh, don't talk about that, is so connecting. I was sitting in the row, and all the people next to me, we were all like, oh my gosh, we're so buying this. It was so fun. So don't be afraid to use humor. Your fundraising doesn't have to be serious all the time. Or the other place that I see it show up is it's very heavy. And yes, what you do may be very heavy, but even in hospice care, there is lightness. And in fact, I would argue, even in that situation, lightness is needed. Lightness is valued. Those moments of a little something is a reprieve. Okay. So it might not be the easiest thing for you to find, but I want you to find the moments and just like keep a working list. Where's the humor in what we do? Is there humor? Is there fun? Is there a fun moment in the hard thing that we do? And start looking for those moments, right? Is there a fun moment? Is there a smile? Is there joy in the hard? Am I telling the stories of the joy in the hard? Okay. Because donors appreciate authenticity. Humor can break the ice. Humor can break the ice and build stronger connection. Her example certainly did. And so it was such a good one. And a little laughter is sometimes one of the best ways to engage your donors and your prospects. All right. Trend number 10. This was really good because it was one of those things I've was in front of me all along, but sometimes you hear something and it's like, oh, I have never thought of it quite that way. So this was one of those moments for me. So My friends over at Memory Fox are amazing, and I have participated in their ethical storytelling report for the past 2 years. So they are all about gathering stories ethically. And that's important to me too. And so I'm like, "Yeah, we agree on this, right?" So what they talked about, and this is trend number 10, consent based storytelling needs a safety net. And what they talked about is you should always ask your storytellers, so these could be the recipient of your program and service, for consent, meaning that they are literally saying this quote or the video or the testimonial or the story, whatever the impact point, and they're giving consent. Yes, you may use this in your marketing material. Yes, you can put this on your website. And many organizations aren't doing that. So you guys, that's step one. You want to make sure that the people that you are telling their stories, that they have actually consented that you can tell their story. The people that you're using their image, if you're using their name, etc. Okay. However, this was the aha moment. They also said that those people, the people who give consent, should then also always have the ability in the future to remove consent. And I was like, oh my gosh, they should. That consent should never be in perpetuity. And it was Chris, the founder of Memory Fox, that was talking about kind of this use case of like, let's say somebody is, I think this was his example, so we'll go with it, was a recipient who was living in a domestic violence shelter, right? And this person goes on to share their story about how that impacted them and how it was a really wonderful, a wonderful way for them to leave an abusive relationship and then, move into this temporary housing and then move beyond, right? So let's say they're telling their story and they have given consent. Let's say 5 years go by and this person's applying for a job and does not want to be Googled and be on that other website for that reason, even 10 years, right? So you really want to think about giving that ability to that person to say, you know what, you used my story, amazing. I was happy to share it for this container of time, and now it's not a fit. So that they have the ability to say, I'd like it removed. Consent should have that ability. So I was like, oh, that's so good. That's so good. And I also want to shout out, this is many, many years ago. And this was from Jacina Allman from the Tender Foundation based here in Atlanta. And I had her on for I did like a roundtable kind of thing all about ethical storytelling. And this was another aha moment. So I'll go ahead and give you this one too. So they support single moms in a number of different ways here in Atlanta. And one of the things that they do in their, highlighting those stories of impact is they'll have a professional photographer come in, take a picture, do a photo shoot with the single mom, her kids, and talk about that story of impact, right? And of course, there's consent there. But she said that they pay the mom for the time. And I was like, oh, that's so good. Of course, pay the person for their time. And they always get a copy of the photos as well. So it ends up being like a really wonderful opportunity to have that family portrait. So think about where can we put in a stipend for this? Where can we actually do this in a fully ethical way? So that's going to be different for every organization, but I think that's really important to think about as you're sourcing these stories of impact of, are they consent based? And can that consent be revoked in the future? And I'm nodding. It should be able to be. Okay, so let's talk about some final thoughts, some next steps. Those were 10 key trends. I'd love to hear what was most resonant with you. And, you can kind of pick out the few trends that you're like, yep, those are the most resonant, because these aren't just ideas. They are action steps. What can you implement today? What do you want to implement tomorrow? What do you want to see your board or your staff implement alongside with you? Maybe it's embracing more bravery in fundraising, testing out a monthly giving program, or simply sending the saw this, thought of you note. Come on. That would be so good. If you just batched a saw this, thought of you, recurring meeting for 30 minutes once a week, think about what would happen. Fundraising success this year and beyond is not about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about taking bold action, brave action, smart action now. If you want to dive deeper, get strategy and guidance and support on the next step, I highly recommend booking a game plan call with me. It's totally free. It's in the link in the show notes, or you can go over to my LinkedIn and send me a message. Happy to talk to you over there. Until next time, keep leading with courage. I'm cheering you on.